Okay, today we're going to talk about the Deep Space Nine episode, A Man Alone. One of these days. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and A Man Alone has to do with a person who was visiting Deep Space Nine and locked into a hollow suite is murdered. No one could get in, it was locked, and there was DNA of no one else except for the fellow who went in. Now, it creates an interesting puzzle type of mystery, and it brings Dr. Bashir to the forefront, portrayed well here. And the other side, the B plot, if you will, Keiko O'Brien is looking for some reason to want to stay on the station. It's caused some rough points in marriage to Miles O'Brien. Quark points this out to Odo, who's visiting the bar, and Odo says, "What's the problem?" And Quark says, "Well, she doesn't like it here." And Odo says, "Who does?" I thought it was a nice line there. Also, we have going on a situation to where Jake Sisko meets Nog, and they immediately start getting into trouble, which leads to the situation of Keiko being fairly resolved, and probably not the end of the mischief that we'll see between Jake and Nog. Nevertheless, the show still has a good ensemble here. We see a little bit more of the distrust between Odo and Sisko. I don't think that Sisko necessarily distrusts the constable, but he's not quite certain how he wants to size up this command. He believes that he knows what's right and wrong, and nobody should get in the way of that. And of course, Sisko believes that procedure should be followed. Nevertheless, that is the early part of that relationship. We also talk about the relationship between Jadzia and Julian. And Julian sees Jadzia for her outward appearance, and Sisko sees her as Curzon, his mentor and old drinking buddy. And while Dax is both and neither, it's an interesting triangle almost, or at least that's the way Bashir sees it. And near the end, Sisko assures him that we're just friends. I can't think of Dax being anyone but Curzon, and he just looks different now. And yet, it's pointed out that Trills are different personalities with different hosts. And so what we have is not just Dax taking over a body, but we have Dax and Jadzia sharing a body, and they create a different personality in doing so. And this is the first time this is really brought up. The previous TNG episodes where they had Odan, who was a Trill, and makeup was different. They changed the makeup on the Trills in DS9 just for the purpose of budget. It would take too much to put the appliances on, and the spots were easy. So that is that. So Sisko basically tells Julian, have at her if you want, but she doesn't seem to be terribly interested in him, more than just a working relationship. So that's one of the things that's followed. It's a little annoying at the beginning because really Bashir is a brilliant doctor, as shown in this episode, but he's also young and a little bit cocky and a bit of a has a bit of a tendency of putting his foot in his mouth. And so that's makes him an interesting character, not necessarily as lovable, but that will take care of itself as the show goes on. So with last week's episode talking about the relationship between Sisko and Kira, it's now between Sisko and Odo. And even though Sisko comes to Odo's aid, it's hard to tell exactly where that stands between them just yet. However, we get a look at how the relationship between Odo and Quark is. Obviously, they are, let's say, frenemies. The fact of the matter is that Odo wants to keep justice and in order, and Quark is out to make money whatever way he can, which does not always lead into the most legal route. And in fact, while Quark is defending Odo in the bar, someone says, "Why are you defending him? You're his worst enemy." And he says, "Well, I guess that's the closest thing he's ever had to a friend." And so that's where we stand with Quark and Odo, and they do make a very good chemistry with each other, I think. So that's A Man Alone. How it actually develops and ends up is decent storytelling, but once again, the characters are the most interesting, and I would say the most important part of this show. So we continue to watch it, and we'd like to know what you think about it as well. Subscribe first if you have not done so already, and ring the bell so you know when it's time for another video to come your way. And of course, we would like to hear what you have to think about this episode, and what other little insights you might have. It's always interesting to read. We'll do a retro review tomorrow on Star Trek The Original Series, and then episode 2 of Strange New Worlds, which interestingly I read today the reason that Anson Mount was not in the first episode was when they were filming it, his wife just had a baby, and so he wanted to spend time with her and the new baby, and that was understandable enough. So he was in like 2 scenes, and the rest of it was an ability. They knew this was going to happen, so they wrote a very good story that involved most of the rest of the crew, and gave a good introduction to the engineer there. So that's what was going on there. But we'll talk about episode 2 coming up on Friday. So until then, don't go far.